7 principles for making marriage work. I like this book a lot. I think that this book truly does, based upon my experience and based upon the research that I've been exposed to, I find that this book has a lot of fidelity with respect to the sort of problems that people encounter in their marriages and the way in which people resolve these problems in their marriages in order to continue to have a successful marriage. Gottman's fundamental claim is that the key to a successful marriage, after reviewing several theories of how marriage is supposed to work and several clinical means of conducting marriage counseling, Gottman concludes that the most important key, the key to a successful relationship is friendship. And that is maintaining a friendship with your partner. And so all the things you would do to maintain friendships with your non-romantic partners, you would also do within the context of a romantic relationship in order for that relationship to be successful. And when he points out the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, or marital destruction, he's highlighting 4 communication behaviors that are destructive to relationships. And he talked about those in the video last week. Of course, criticism is the first of the 4 horsemen. Do you have any questions about the video now, or we didn't have a chance to really talk about it at the end of class? Anything you'd like to share? All right, well, let me make sure, because these will be on the test, let me make sure that you have the definitions. So, what is criticism? Well, what Gottman does is he contrasts criticism with complaints. So when he says that when he observes that there's criticism in a relationship, he's saying that that is distinct from when a relational partner has a complaint. And criticism is global. Criticism attacks the person, whereas a complaint is about the situation. And you see this distinction come up over and over again when Gottman is talking about conflict within romantic and marital relationships. The distinction between the situation and the people in that situation. And so he says that complaints are global, and so they're about the person. I'm sorry, criticism is global, whereas complaint is about the situation. So complaints are specific, and criticism is global. The second of the 4 horsemen is contempt. And of course, what Gottman says is that contempt is the most destructive of the 4 horsemen, because what contempt implies is disgust. Now, if you go back to that model of the self that we talked about earlier in the class, we divided the self out between that that internal component, that id or that I, and then the various perspectives that others take on the self. So you've got your generalized perspectives, and then you've got your significant perspectives. Significant perspectives being like really close romantic relationships, your parents, your sergeant, or whatever the case is. So when your significant other, that is your marital partner, your spouse, your partner, or whatever, looks at you with disgust, that's obviously something which is incredibly destructive to the self and incredibly destructive to self-esteem. And so when the relational partner engages in contempt, it's destructive to the relationship because it's destructive to the self. And so complaint manifests itself in things like biting sarcasm, cynicism, name-calling, eye-rolling, sneering, mockery, hostile humor, etc. But the key is that it conveys disgust with the partner. And not disgust with the situation, but disgust with the person. And so a logical extension of criticism is contempt. Contempt is sort of criticism squared. There's defensiveness, which are counterattacks and victimization. So rather than just listening to the partner and taking into consideration the partner's concerns, the response is to counterattack. And so what happens is there is essentially like a volley of attacks that happen, with one person bringing up a complaint or criticism, another person responding with a counterattack, and then that just going back and forth in a sort of destructive spiral. So counterattacks and victimization are the key components of defensiveness. Then there's stonewalling. Stonewalling is disengaging or turning away from the partner in the middle of conflict. And actually what Gottman talks about is, Gottman says that this is a natural extension of our fight or flight response. And what he observes, remember he talked about how he brings couples in and he has couples engage in conflict and he hooks them all up to like the biophysical measures and the jiggleometer and all that kind of stuff. Well, what he finds is that during a conflict, sometimes partners will suffer what he calls flooding. And flooding is when their biochemical system is just simply overwhelmed. And signs of flooding are things like high blood pressure, high heart rate, intense skin conductivity, which is to say sweating, and the body just generally heating up. And when a person experiences flooding, what that is that's a burst of adrenaline into the system. And what it's telling the body is, it's telling the body to do one of two things, to fight or to flee. And what stonewalling is the fleeing response to that rush of adrenaline that happens in the middle of a conflict. That's the fleeing response to flooding. Of course, the other response can be fighting, because the body is prepared to do battle or to run away. And so what Gottman finds is that almost always when stonewalling is happening, it happens at the same time as flooding. That is this intense biophysical rush that takes place. And that's stonewalling. Okay, so these are the four horsemen. These are the four communicative behaviors that Gottman uses to predict whether or not a couple is going to get divorced within 15 years. And remember, he's 95% accurate if he can watch a couple engage in these behaviors and, of course, measure their biophysical responses to conflict. He can predict with 95% accuracy divorce within a year. Now, at the same time, he points out that simply because some of these behaviors, some of these communication behaviors manifest themselves in conflict, that doesn't necessarily mean that a couple is going to get divorced, but just on average, couples get divorced within 15 years of engaging in these kinds of conflict-type behaviors. So what I want to do is I want to watch, in true fashion, I want to switch a little bit, watch a short video clip. The short video clip is going to be from a film, one of my favorite films, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, based on a play by Ed Albee, starring Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. Anybody seen this? Anybody? Seriously? One person? One person has seen this film? Only one person? How about the play? Anybody seen the play? Okay, we've got two people. One of them's a lab assistant. Okay. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? It's really an Academy Award-winning movie. I believe it won an Academy Award for costumes, and then I can't remember which of the actors won an Academy Award. But it's an example of sort of good film. And what the film is about is it's about a couple that's engaged in an ongoing conflict. And what we, as the audience, are privy to is how this conflict is exaggerated or exacerbated when another couple comes over to visit. And so after a night of drinking, this older married couple invites a younger couple to come on over for a few drinks, and in the process of having a few drinks, like all of their conflicts sort of come to the surface. And so it's this sort of conflict-ridden film focused on this older couple that is Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. And it's well acted, the dialogue is good, the characters have a lot of fidelity as well as a lot of consistency.